You gotta use a headset or.
All right, let's go. Quiet down. Hi, this is Steve Gilmore. This is the Gilmore Gang, and we've got a full house today, including, in no particular order, so I'll start with a lady, Laura Fitton, otherwise known as Pistachio, and evidently having some interesting talks with one of our favorite micro message services. But she's not going to admit that. Also on the call, one of our favorite micro message services partners in a number of ways, and probably the most prolific. I don't know. I guess you aren't a venture capitalist, but we'll find out what you are. John Borthwick of BetaWorks. Welcome, John.
Hey, Steve.
Our regulars, Robert Scoble, coming to us from Half Moon Bay. There's somebody behind him who's got the keys to his ankle bracelet. And Kevin Marks.
Hi there.
Welcome, Kevin. And Dan Farber on the phone from New York, CBS News Online. Welcome, Dan.
Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us. And last but certainly not least, representing all things European, the fabulous Loic Lemure.
Hi, everyone. Just not European, I hope, but hi.
Well,
I don't think raccoons are European.
Well, we'll get into that argument later in the year. We'll see what Arrington has to say about that. So, in any case, I wanted to continue the unraveling of the RSS is dead theme some more. Over the past few weeks, we've had some very interesting discussions with people from PubSub Hubbub, Brett Taylor from Facebook/FriendFeed, and just it seems like that the RSS and real-time space have collided now, and we're on our way toward actually seeing what parts of these various old systems and new systems are going to be able to work together. And I wanted to start by asking John Borthwick. John, what's your take on the emergence of what I guess you could call a bridge between the old world of RSS and the new world of micromessaging? How do you think that's going? Do you think it's important, etc.?
So I think it's very important, because I think that the infrastructure of sort of open the messaging bus has been opened up beyond the proprietary networks that formed a lot of the early stage innovation, and so I think it's really important. It's how is it going? I think it's going pretty much as you would expect, in that there's a bunch of innovation happening. There's some efforts right now to standardize some of that. I think most of it is moving in a sort of coherent, similar direction, and I think it's all good.
Robert Scoble, what's your take on where we are in terms of integrating RSS with the real time?
I think there's been a lot of innovation in the last 2 months, with the RSS Cloud and the PubSub Hubbub. But I'm still waiting to see a real move toward a decentralized style of Twitter.
Laura, do you believe there's such a thing as a decentralized Twitter, and how do you see the real-time environment shaping up at the moment?
Do I believe there will ever be such thing as decentralized Twitter? As much as I'm obviously a raving fan of the service and pretty deeply steeped in it, it's hard to imagine it resisting all market forces to open up. I think interoperability and some form of federation will come into play at some time. And certainly the way, I mean, RSS offers one interesting standard, and the way, obviously I've been very, very focused on tools in the real-time web because of 140. The way RSS is being used as the proxy for pulling all this together and aggregating them is definitely interesting and emergent.
Loic, you have with Seismic Web, and I'm not sure about whether Twirl is still an existing product or whether it's been folded into the larger Seismic family, but you've got an aggregator that moves across a number of these different services. What's your take on decentralization, and are you a part of that?
Well, sorry. The way we see it is we aggregate as many services as possible in it, and on different screens, as you said. So desktop right now, we have 2.5 million downloads of Seismic Desktop, and the web, which is growing very, very fast. We're very happy about it, and we have a number of mobile platforms coming. And yeah, I think this is all converging, and I definitely miss RSS in there. So we are definitely working on how to integrate RSS in it as well. I still read blogs, and not only through links coming on Twitter and Facebook. So I think it's needed, but there's a lot to do if you think about just following up with what Twitter and Facebook are building. If you think the retweet API, the geo-localization API, on Twitter, Facebook just launched the mentions. So that's a lot, for small companies like us. So just following up with that is really interesting.
Kevin Marks, you've been at Google, now you're at British Telecom. You've got an interesting play there in Ribbit that I hope you'll start to talk about at some point. Do you see these services as starting to interoperate in some sort of, if not federated way, an ad hoc federation of services
Sure.
that will, and describe how you see that as actually happening as opposed to theoretically happening.
Well, I'm seeing it happening already. I mean, Twitter was down most of this morning, but FriendFeed was up and working because it was calling the APIs and routing stuff, and it was routing round and routing through. So those of us who were using FriendFeed could still talk to each other and see things in real time, but it was being fed out to Twitter and pulling back again. So that's one example of where that's working. And what we're seeing is that we're starting to standardize on ways of expressing these messages and moving them between services, and the activity streams effort is part of that. PubSub Hubbub couples with that, and so on. So there's a lot of stuff that's joining these together, because as people start building these things, people start wiring them up and connecting them together. Not all of them are exactly the same as Twitter. They had but the feeds are how we couple them together at the moment, and building on that is a useful way to do it too.
Dan Farber, you've sort of moved over to the mainstream media, but I know you do continue to follow some of the emerging technologies. What's CBS Online's take on micromessaging, Twitter, etc.? Are you using this? Are you going to use it more efficiently in the future?
So we're very avid users of the social media. For CBS News, it's just kind of, or for any news organization, it's kind of part of the recipe these days, which is you need that kind of hyper distribution for your content, and you need that to help connect with the community, and to try to not just try to bring people to your site, but to bring your site to other people through friends and through these mechanisms. So it's critically important, especially if you look at the younger generation. The numbers we see that television viewing, for example, is not declining in general, but what we're seeing is internet usage is rapidly increasing, especially among 18 to 29, 18 to 39. So as any kind of business or organization, you want to intersect with people and make sure that you're mimicking the way that they're using the tools. So definitely.
Well, I'd like to get a little crosstalk going here. I've sort of thrown these sort of softballs out at everybody, but let's start with John Borthwick. Where would you like to go in terms of this conversation? What do you think is interesting about this space. Tell us all about the things that you're going to do to make lots of money, and seriously, what we at the Real Time Conference, you and Ron Conway were really kind of defined, I think, a general move toward filtering that we all anticipate is going to become significant. Where are we in that? And everybody else, just feel free to, we'll have to sort of catch up to you sometimes in terms of video, but let's just try and have a conversation here. John?
Sure. So let me just pick up where you started. Is that, from a starting point, I mean, I think that there's relative stages of openness that we've seen through markets as they emerge online, and I think that what we're seeing today is more open an environment from a business standpoint, meaning that there are businesses who are driving this into market, than we've seen to date on the internet. I think we've seen a bunch of protocols being driven to market that have been more open than this by businesses, but not businesses actually being driven to market. So I see that what's happening today is that you've got Twitter has defined a degree of openness that a set of the other real-time sharing platforms are now trying to match. And so the streams are colliding, being remashed, being reintegrated. That in turn is picking up the velocity of stuff within the streams, which in turn is picking up the need for filtering. And so I think that what you see today is you see, in the last week we've had, quite a bit of stuff going on with the Twitter list functionality, which I think we're going to see more of that in the next week or two. On our side, TweetDeck is one of our companies, and we're doing a lot of work on that side. We were the first guys, I think, to do groups, and we pushed out a group directory maybe 4 weeks ago on TweetDeck, and so that's going to evolve now that Twitter's going to have a list API. So what you see is that you see these tools, and lists is an example of it, just because it's a functional equivalent to a filtering mechanism, namely by groups, and then being able to share and syndicate those groups. You're going to see all this stuff in the next 6 months at least. You're going to see an explosion of data coming into the stream. Last point is that I think you're also seeing a lot of data coming into the stream programmatically. So another one of our companies is Twitter Feed. The MySpace guys enabled syncing into Twitter 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago. You could see the volume of traffic that's coming in now from MySpace. That traffic is coming in, though, in a programmatic fashion. So it's people on MySpace who synced up their accounts, and so they type things on MySpace like "I'm happy," which they put on their profile page. It syncs into Twitter and pushes out a tweet which says "I'm happy" with a link back into MySpace. It's not clear that it's an entirely beneficial user experience yet, but these programmatic people are pushing programmatic content into the stream, and that's also going to push up the need for filtering.
Laura, you agree?
I'm having actually a really, really hard time hearing. I'm getting a pretty bad echo.
Okay, well, we'll see what we can do with that. Let's just take a break. What is it that are you coming in on your headphones?
Okay, no, I've got it fixed now. Sorry about that.
Okay.
How about someone else take a turn, and I'll jump back in when I have something good to say.
Okay. Loic, what do you think?
Do you have a specific question, or
no? Were you listening to what John said? Well, I can see a couple of openings you could drive a truck through, but I'll let you do it.
In general, no, I have no. I think what John does is great. Give me an
Are you doing anything to compete with some of his properties?
I think, of course, we compete, but I think it's a space which has a lot of empty space, and it's been. You can see it, right? We started with Twill almost 2 years ago as one of the very first Twitter clients, and now with Sysmic, it's growing very nicely, and there are many players. As we were just discussing with Scobble before the show, there is a number of applications which are on one screen, so Tweety, for example, is fantastic on the iPhone and is also on the Mac. And our aim is to be on as many screens as possible. So we already have the web, which goes on many screens already. On desktop, obviously, Mac and PC, and we have mobile coming in. So I think what's going to be interesting is to provide a way for the users to have a continuity in their experience. So if I leave my Mac, I'd like to find exactly the same content on my iPhone. And that is going to take much more resources than building an app for one screen. And that's definitely what we're building right now. And I think the next 6 months will be very interesting. We'll be launching a few new products before the end of the year.
Okay, Laura, now it's your turn.
I think that kind of, follow someone's lifestyle continuity between interfaces and apps is actually really important. I think people are, from what we're hearing, pretty disjointed when they have to interact with the app one way on their phone and a whole different way on their desktop and a whole different way in their browser. The other thing I think, and this is a bit of a maybe naive view, everybody's kind of looking for who's going to be the winner, who's going to be the big mass, who's going to be the leading application. And I see these going pretty niche as this goes mainstream. I'm very fascinated by what are the trends that will make Twitter truly catch on mainstream, what will make the whole real-time web truly catch on mainstream. And I think a lot of it is comfort level and familiarity, relevance to your particular life and solving the types of problems you have. And I actually don't think it's going to go the way more mass forms of media have, where there's a few giant gorillas in the room that really sop up all the audience. I'm always, I love both John and Loic very much. And when I see a lot of juxtaposition of TweetDeck versus Seesmic, I laugh and go, why don't you guys turn back to back and go find niches within the market? And yeah, niche isn't that great a business strategy, but find the different unfilled space. I was very glad to hear you say that today, Loic, to focus on the unfilled space and solving the problems individuals have.
One unfilled space, Steve. Go ahead, John.
Sorry. So just to respond to both Loic and Laura, I think that one of the things that's fascinating about this is that there is and this is why we built and designed BetaWorks in this way, is there's an ecosystem emerging, right? It's easy to set up and it's always fun to do the sports game of one client versus another. TweetDeck is part of the BetaWorks network. It's doing great. It definitely competes head on with Loic. The TweetDeck team think about that every day. Bitly, on the other hand, TweetDeck uses Bitly. So does Loic. Loic actually integrated Bitly in a manner maybe 8 to 10 weeks before TweetDeck did, that integrated user accounts. And so we're viewing this, I see that there's an active ecosystem that's emerging. There's a lot of competition on the client side. As Loic said, there's a real push towards the server and syncing preferences and filters on the server, which in turn is pushing up investment costs and development costs that I think is going to distinguish a handful of players. At TweetDeck, we acquired a company in London maybe 9 months ago, expressly because of their sync server expertise. And so, I think that is going to change the profile of the companies. But what you're seeing is a lot of competition and you're seeing a lot of cooperation.
Robert, go ahead.
The area I was going to say that's still open is curation. The apps now are getting so rich. I have Brizzly on the screen. I have TweetDeck. I have Seesmic. I have on my iPhone Tweety and Simply Tweet. And the apps are getting so rich and so built out that now I'm looking at how do I take this stream of stuff coming toward me, make some sense of it for my friends, and spit it back out to something that looks like Tumblr or Posterous. And I haven't yet seen anybody who's done that from a client perspective, particularly on the iPhone.
Robert, first, we could not do it for you anyway because you were following about 90,000 people. So now that you've just realized that you need to follow fewer people to make it relevant, we can work with you.
Okay, joking aside, because I was using FriendFeed for a long time while you guys were playing around with Twitter to focus on a small group of people. I don't have that yet.
Robert,
on all these clients, I don't have the ability to really curate and add some value to the stream that's going by.
So when you say curate, can you unpack that a little bit? Because
Yeah, so I'm watching 3,500 people come to me, and I pick out of that river going by, I pick a couple of tweets every hour that is really good stuff. And I want to put underneath that tweet almost like a blog post or a video, or I even might want to turn on a community like a Google Wave or a friend feed community chat room like what we're talking about, what's on my screen right now. And I want to send that back out to my friends who are listening to me. I am sort of doing that today with Twitter's favorite feature, but the favorite feature doesn't let me add any value onto each of those tweets and doesn't really let me retweet it back. The retweeting isn't satisfying for what I'm looking for, and blogging isn't satisfying because it's so hard to get a really nice graphical representation of a tweet into my WordPress blog and then blog underneath it. And a blog is not, it sort of is real time now thanks to the RSS Cloud and the PubSub infrastructure, but you can't really subscribe back to a curated blog into Twitter. And so
Right.
I'd really like to see a complete system that does all that. Yeah.
So what I would argue, Robert, is that I think this is emerging. It's emerging sort of fitfully, and I think, in my opinion, too slowly. But I think that it's emerging in the way that a market emerges. Because, speaking, looking at TweetDeck, even Twitter feed, even Bitly, everything has to, all the data that we flow back into the stream has to conform to the platform. And so the metadata that we insert in the stream, like TweetDeck, started as a manner to be able to use the re gesture, and yet the re gesture is not a gesture that is being sort of broadly adopted by the community yet. And so what happens is that I think that there's this gradual and organic process where innovation is happening on the edges, it then scales up, and then the platform provider has to embrace pieces of it. This is what's happening with the retweet functionality as that moves into sort of into the infrastructure.
What was the thing that you said was not being broadly adopted?
Well, the re functionality.
You mean retweet?
No, R-E.
Okay, so in other words, threaded conversation? I'm not sure I understand you.
So if there's a gesture, we helped set up a thing called microsyntax with Stowe Boyd to actually throw some sort of conform and throw some bring together the community on some of these gestures, but the re gesture essentially means reference to a URL or to something without having to retweet the whole thing. So if I look at my stream right now, I'm seeing somebody who says...
Isn't that baked into the at responses? I mean, it's in the API, it's just that Twitter doesn't service it very well. So if you add someone, then it knows which it's in response to. It's just that Twitter itself is burying that.
Yes, correct. But that's
guys do that better, right?
Yeah, but you need the platform provider to actually embrace this and to integrate it in so that you can actually, conversations there's this tension where either on the client side, people could add threaded conversations into a TweetDeck, but then those conversations, if those don't go back into the Twitter stream, if they're not searchable within the Twitter stream, is that then a positive thing or not? So it's, I think that you're getting sort of competition coming in and pushing innovation, and then the platform is gradually adopting those things. But it's just,
the platform's backing down from it.
There's also a lot of tension and latency between what can be done and what actually is done. I mean, the users have to also pick this up and make it go mass, and that takes a long time. I mean, people still don't really understand how @replies work, and that's been out there as prior art.
Well, another way
for 3 years on Twitter, and you can argue for years before Twitter on other platforms.
I mean, @replies don't work. That's what isn't understood.
Well, I think they added the ability to know which post you're replying to, and that's in the API. It's in the data structures, but
if you use the swoosh.
If you use, yes,
if
correct.
you use the swoosh rather than typing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we can
Yeah.
design all we
Yeah, that's
want. We can design these
true.
elaborate systems for how we want people to do this. But my everyday life is at the edge of people who are just starting to start. And, you know, I'm excited about the possibilities, and I'm also very wary about the complexity of getting into very sophisticated. You know, I love what Stowe's doing; it's important, but I also recognize that from the time we figured out we needed hashtags to the time they really started to get powerful was 2 years.
And the other problem with hashtags, and I think also what Stowe or anybody who's trying to develop a separate ontology and then sort of graft it back onto behavior, is that nobody really yet knows what it is that they're doing with this entire space. People have discovered that Twitter is fun. They've discovered that that micromessages can, in some cases, replace other functionality, particularly email and to some extent IM. But they haven't yet figured out, and I don't know that they ever will figure out, that there's some sort of structure to overlay in order to do this. I mean, Kevin, you've been involved in microformats from the beginning. We all know about the success of microformats, or at least supposedly. But what's the what's the downside of trying to push these kinds of standards, into the environment?
Well, the work is you've got to do it after people have already done the practices, as Laura was saying. You need people to start doing these things and evolving it, and then you standardize it and draw it in. And in the same way as Twitter has been responding to the users and drawing it into the UX, is something you draw into the specs and standards as well. I think I'm disappointed about the reply to stuff, because I've seen that drop away. Tweetree did that very well a year ago. And the previous Twitter search before they bought it actually showed you the threaded conversations quite nicely. And I know that both these guys' tools, when you do replies using their tool rather than using the website, they actually make the threading stuff work properly. So those pieces are all there, yet somehow it's not something that Twitter's paying attention to making more useful, and so it's sitting there in the data stream without actually being fully implemented. Because Twitter itself doesn't show what things are in reply to, except in that tiny little link down the bottom that doesn't display very well. So that's an opportunity for third parties to do more, and they have. And I've seen we've seen tools that do more of that. I expect we will see more of that, and I expect we'll see more augmentation elsewhere, as we have done with FriendFeed. But FriendFeed does a fairly good job of, if I reply to something on FriendFeed, it will send that back to Twitter and wire it up properly, but it doesn't always pick up the ones from Twitter and feed them back in the stream as well. So you end up with this sort of tangled set of things that aren't very well coupled.
Well, I mean, Laura, what's your take on FriendFeed? I know that you're much more of a Twitter person.
Well, so this is where my radical honesty comes in handy. I'm actually quite dumb with software UIs. I need them to be very simple. I stayed with Twitter.com almost exclusively for a very long time. I still use Twirl as my primary source of my follow-only account. So I like a lot of simplicity, and frankly, FriendFeed was a little more complex than I cared to dive into, because of the time it was coming up. There was sort of a large base out there that had a perception of being interested in what I was doing, so it was hard to connect to a specific group. So it was hard for me to get started on it. But and I'm the same way with Facebook. So I'm an odd bird. I'm not a good one to go by.
John, obviously you're a partner with Twitter. What can you say good about FriendFeed?
What can I say good about FriendFeed? I mean, I used FriendFeed some. I mean, I found, so Laura said it very politely, I always found the UI very difficult in FriendFeed. I don't know why, but there was some sort of, it didn't click for me. But you asked me to say something good about FriendFeed. I watched FriendFeed and participated in FriendFeed and watched all of you using FriendFeed a lot, because I think FriendFeed broke sort of really important new ground in terms of tracking and sharing the gestures, which then in turn become the metadata, which then in turn become the filters. So I was fascinated by that. I was fascinated by some of the implementations they did around search. For me, it was the gestures and the integration of gestures that was most interesting in FriendFeed, and I want to see, what happens.
Do you see
What
anything? Do you see that in any way being usable over on the Twitter side? It doesn't sound like there's much uptake here. I think perhaps Facebook's acquisition will drive more attention being paid to some of the FriendFeed internals. But are these just going to be two silos that sort of look past each other?
You mean FriendFeed and Twitter, or Friend?
Yeah, I mean basically, or Facebook and Twitter.
No, I think that there's no. I think that these streams are going to connect. I think the streams are fundamentally different. I mean, I think it's we're in very much the early stage of evolution of these things. We're looking at sort of plankton-like life form and trying to extrapolate from this emergent syntax, this emergent behavior, what the thing's going to look like, and that's always hard to do. So I think predicting how these things are going to evolve is hard. I do think that these streams are fairly different. I think the FriendFeed stream and the Twitter stream were closer to being alike than the Twitter stream and the Facebook stream. I think that the asymmetrical friend nature in Facebook makes it pretty fundamentally different. I think that so that's, I'll shut up. That's some, I think I said some nice things about FriendFeed along the way.
Good. Yeah, you get a gold star. Loic, you've been working a lot with Facebook. What do you see as the differences in the potential integration opportunities between the two platforms?
We've also integrated FriendFeed in Twill, like at the very, very early days. So I've been a fan of FriendFeed very early. I don't see. I mean, everything I hear from my antennas, which may be limited sometimes, is that that they are not working on FriendFeed at all anymore. Maybe someone can correct me if they have better information. So we will not integrate FriendFeed in Sysmic just because I think the new FriendFeed will be on Facebook. And we are working very closely with Twitter and Facebook and also our social software. And I think it's going in a way which is converging. You see, you have now Twitter and Facebook going closer and closer to each other. As I was saying, you have the retweets on one side on Twitter, and you have the likes on Facebook. It's very similar. You have the @replies with the in reply to on Twitter, and you have a thread already on Facebook. And these are those two, but then you have Yahoo Meme coming, you have MySpace, which has its feed, you have LinkedIn, which has status updates, even though people don't use it yet enough or not much. And I'm waiting for the news from Google that maybe Kevin can talk to us about. My personal take is that it's not at all Google Wave, but that there will be some kind of a status update on Google, on Gmail and so on very soon. So the question, I think, long term, if we look more than 6 months, like next year, is how will this look like? Will that be that we update all of those and then we get it all, and these are all many duplicates? Will there be a clearinghouse of all the status updates? Will they be converging pretty much like IM when we had, and they are still kind of different, but AIM and GTalk and so on? There is a lot. It's very, very new space. So,
well, I mean, we're trying to make them converge. That's what the activity stream stuff is about, and that's one of those people sitting in a room discussing how to label things, which isn't very interesting to watch, but the results end up working reasonably well. We've got MySpace and Facebook generating activity streams feeds already. We've got Twitter. Twitter aren't
Facebook
doing
I've
it.
heard of, but the other company, what? MySpace? I'm not familiar with them.
Well, we don't all look through the world in the same way. Netflix as well. You might have heard of them. They're generating activity streams too. And the point is to converge this stuff and express it in a common way, and to bring this into the open social realm as well, so that the sites that are built on open social are able to generate these in a common way. That's part of the discussion that's going on. So that would mean that the Google stuff on Open Social and High Five and the other sites that are built on that would be able to do that too.
When will Google launch its own Twitter like in Gmail? That's the question. I'd like.
That is the question. I can't answer that. I couldn't answer it when I was there. I can't answer it now. There's bits of it there. There's stuff there in iGoogle already. There's bits of it in other places. You can see sort of bits of it poking out. There's some of it inside Latitude and so on. So the infrastructure underneath is ActivityStream-like, and then there's bits of that being adopted by different bits of Google over time.
This is so reminiscent. Dan Farber, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, this always strikes me as so reminiscent of the Y2K timeframe when Microsoft had Exchange and Outlook, and Lotus and IBM had Notes, and then Netscape came along and bought up a bunch of open source and different smaller players to try and cobble together a collaboration suite. It seems like Google's got as Kevin puts it, a lot of bits that they're trying to stitch together, or may be trying to stitch together. It's not hard to tell. And we all know what actually happened, or I think we all know what happened in the Y2K run-up. Basically, the market got split between Microsoft and IBM.
The market for what?
For collaboration, or the early stages of collaboration. Isn't this what we're seeing here as the next phase of collaboration technology?
Well, I think you're talking about the fact that they go through these epics or these phases in which some large companies, and in that case, that was a period in which it was about business usage. Now we're talking about planetary usage, and it's much more of a free-for-all, though obviously there are very large players that we've discussed here. And, it's still so early in the game that you can have a Google or a Microsoft and a Twitter can come out of nowhere. And yet, we're all talking about, well, when is Google going to have it, or when is Google Wave going to appear, and when are they going to duplicate all these features? And yet, Twitter still seems to have traction. So it's very hard to predict. I think all we know is that this period of foment is really good, because that's where all the innovation is going to come from, and it doesn't come from working in some laboratory in secret for years and years, but by putting it out there and letting people play with it and see how people want to use it and how they deal with these huge rivers and how they deal with who's going to really solve the filtering problem and all those other issues.
Somebody jump in.
So, you get what you ask for there, Steve.
Yeah, well, it's a real-time stream.
I love what Dan said about putting things out there and seeing what people do with them, because ultimately it's not what the software does, it's what the user does, to quote Hugh MacLeod's cartoon that I've had as my business card for like 4 years now.
I think the other thing that's different here is that this is, Dan mentioned that the majority of what happened before was in the enterprise space. Is that I think the public sharing aspect of this just makes it fundamentally different, because the streams are now searchable, navigable, and there's a lot of data going in, but there's also a lot of data coming out. And so I think that I think what we're seeing here is different to what happened in the early stages of collaboration. It's still collaboration. It's still, the mixing of communications and media and a whole bunch of sort of collaborative sharing. But I think it's different now that it's searchable.
Right. Well, I mean, there's definitely. I mean, if people are looking at some sort of historical reference about, as I think somebody mentioned, about the IM streams coming together, well, that just didn't happen, I think maybe what you're suggesting, John, is that there's the possibility now, because of the public nature of the stream, that there's going to be an ad hoc coming together regardless of what the individual strategies of the various vendors are about.
It's happening.
It's not really public.
Sorry, Ludwig?
No, I'm sorry, John. Go ahead. It's public on Twitter only, right? On Facebook, it's not public. We can't search it right now. We can't put it on clients. And it's the same on other social software. So I would say the that Facebook is still much bigger. So the majority of it, unfortunately, is not public yet, and it's great that Twitter is opening it. But I agree, that's what makes it very interesting. But we really need the Facebook search and.
But there is always a mixture of public and private. I think that's part of the point. And yes, Twitter default public, but you can be private on Twitter too. I know several people who are. Sorry. The other thing is to bring Microsoft in. I think that interview you posted with Ray Ozzie today or last night, Steve, was very interesting on that, and that the fact that the live team at Microsoft, Rob Dolin and Dara Basanjo and those guys are actually very focused on this stream stuff and building a front end to this. And yeah, they're not fashionable and cool, but they're actually hooking up to this stuff and making it work. And the announcement today with Lily Zheng being given a team to put together on that is very interesting, because Lily's very smart and is very switched onto this stuff, and I'm excited by that. So I think they seem to be picking up the ball there.
And for a long time, Microsoft was probably playing more open than many of the other players. I mean, I think they still are, but there was a time
in some ways they are. I mean,
it was a time basically when it was Google and Microsoft at the engineering level that were really focused on API access to these core fundamentals.
Sure. The Microsoft guys have been a big part of the activity stream staff. They've been involved with the Open Web Foundation things. They've been implementing a lot of this stuff in places. There does seem to be some kind of sea change there. And yeah, it's against the culture at core, because the culture at core of Windows and Office is not openness. But the development side of Microsoft is about getting developers working. And I'm seeing that they are picking up the need to interoperate with people much more strongly, that's an encouraging sign.
Oops.
I think you just muted yourself, Steve.
John, you were jumping in at some point. What were you going to say?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. It was my fault.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that I think it's the evolution that the market's in right now, where it's essentially new players who are coming in and defining these streams, is driving a lot of healthy innovation. And whether that's at the Twitter level, Facebook, or LinkedIn, or to the TweetDeck, or the Seismic, or Twirl, or whatever level, I think that I was fascinated in the discussion that you guys did last week on SideWiki. Because I think that once Microsoft and Google start playing here, which everybody sort of sits back and waits for it to happen, I don't know whether it will happen or what it will look like. I mean, I've been hearing for a year and a half that Google's going to do something with Gmail or with, some status integration, and it hasn't come yet. But I think that when those guys, their first move into this space is going to be really important, because as providers of platforms like search, like browsers, they have like operating systems. They have a stake in this, which is different to a lot of the edge-based innovation that's bubbling up. And so, the SideWiki conversation, for me, the thing that concerned me about SideWiki is Chrome. And I saw it as a feature which is coming into the toolbar, but if it becomes successful, then it moves into Chrome, and then that makes me feel uneasy for a bunch of reasons.
But why?
But
why would it be Chrome adoption isn't going to go to more than, say, 30% in the next few years? I mean, what would the implications be of that if people started to use a SideWiki-like product? I mean, effectively, FriendFeed is a SideWiki-like product that we use to tie on Building 43 to tie these two streams together. I mean, this isn't it's neither rocket science nor the province of any individual vendor.
Yeah, I think there's this the Highlander mistake that there can be only one, which is endemic in this. And actually,
I'm sorry, Kevin. Can you say that again?
There's what I call the Highlander mistake. There can be only one will win. And actually, what we're seeing is this stuff is very multimodal. We do experience these things in lots of different ways. We read them as feeds. We read them in your guys' clients. We read them on our phones. We switch back and forth between those to communicate with each other. And even Laura was saying she's the odd one out, doesn't use these things, but she's switching between devices and doing that as well, because the primary mental connection is with the people, and then we're used to interacting with people through these different means, and we get better at navigating those. So the assumption that Google can do something in the browser and take over everything, or Microsoft can do something in the OS and take over everything, I don't think is right. I think that they need to tap into the interactions that we're having and help us do them. And there are things that they could do in browser OS side to make some of the sort of logging in and security stuff work better. So we're not always typing in passwords, but there's a bunch of stuff at that layer they could do.
Well, so now that we've disagreed with you, John, what were you trying to say that you're afraid of?
So my concern is, I mean, if you look at SideWiki today and the potential for the integration of things like SideWiki into Chrome, my concern is that you essentially balkanizing a data set. And when I listened to your call, I think last Saturday, the first thing I did afterwards was I went and checked that there were actually links to comments which were made in SideWiki. Is it searchable? Is it navigable? Or is it in a completely closed environment? I mean, I think somebody on the call last week brought up Medium, which was a toolbar, a Firefox plugin that did some stuff similar to SideWiki, and that was fairly closed. It's the balkanization of data and these data sets and these data silos. Loic was saying before how important it is for Facebook to make their stream searchable, is that this stuff has to be accessible, I think, by the open web, by the streams, because then the velocity of interactions, the velocity of innovation is going to continue apace. And I think that we've seen sort of these ebbs and flows where we move from sort of centralization to decentralization. And I don't want to go back to sort of a Rain Man world, if you remember that thing.
Yeah, something about underwear. Robert, you have to go?
Yeah, I have to run. I have a chat on Mashable in a couple of seconds. But interesting conversation.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us.
Sorry. This has been a good show. Back to the friend feed stuff. The reason friend feed has such a complex UI is we're not in control of who I get to share with my audience there. And people have said this over and over again to me, that they come in and it's so noisy, and I get the same feeling when I go to Google Wave now. That's what I want the curation tool for, and it will have a community component of that, right? I will want to turn on a Google Wave underneath a blog post I'm curating or telling you something about, because I want to talk to everybody, but I want to be in control of that and have it.
Clearly, you weren't listening last week. I mean, you're out. You don't have control.
Well, sorry, I want it. So, and when I do get it, we'll all recognize we have something special. Twitter gives me control. I have control of who I see and who sees me. There you go.
So, in
you
other
don't
words,
have control over who sees you.
Absolutely, I do. Steve Gilmore's blocked me this week. I can't see him anymore.
You can totally go
until you log out and look at his.
Of course, but in my stream that I get
do a search.
Most times, I get to see only the people who have let me see them.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm looking forward to the day that your mass delusion becomes commonplace. But
See
I
you
don't
later.
think it's going to happen. Laura, what do you mean by you can just log out? On Twitter you can just log out? I don't know how that works.
But yeah, unless you have a private feed. If you look at a public feed in a logged out state, you can see it whether the person has blocked you or not.
And isn't RSS, remember RSS? Isn't RSS, doesn't that run counter to, for example, I've been blocked by a couple people that for quite a long time, and yet through their RSS feed I can just sign on to them and create a artificial identity or whatever it is it's called on FriendFeed, and I can monitor what they are saying to my heart's content. Evidently, it doesn't matter. I'm not logging in through FriendFeed through my Twitter identity, because if I did, I would get a blocked visual. So isn't there kind of an impedance mismatch between the old model and whatever the new one's going to be?
Well, I don't know necessarily an impedance mismatch, but I often think of the block function more of a flagging function. You're saying the old technology did let you block? I mean,
Well, RSS syndicates this information, and it doesn't really have any kind of social graph attached to it. So
Right.
it's a simple
It's
way of
very
routing
permissive.
around this.
Right. Well, it's RSS is like Twitter. It started out default public, and adding permissions to that afterwards takes work. I mean, you can do it. You can use OAuth to decide who gets to see feeds, which is the Facebook model. Facebook started the other way around, which is you only see things if you're allowed to see them. And the argument they made very strongly for a long time was we can't let you draw the data out of our site because our users want to be able to delete it and put it down their personal memory hole in future.
Well,
And they seem to be stepping away from that now a little, but that's still an issue because people are nervous. People naturally want to retell their own stories all the time. They want to be able to have the illusion of control that Robert wants, of being able to say, "Oh, I didn't really say that," and tell a better story about themselves. And part of the issue of talking about yourself in public is that it actually makes you examine what you have said rather than what you thought you had said.
Well, that's not always true either, but somehow I don't think that that we're going to see any kind of reworking of the RSS fundamentals around OAuth or any other standard
Sure.
to be able to. You think that's going to happen?
What about RSS? I'm talking about feeds in general. RSS is.
Well, I'm not.
Dave's
Adam,
fiat, but
RSS, same thing.
Adam, it's a separate layer. OAuth is a separate layer. It's at the HTML layer, the HTTP layer, where you say, I'd like to get to see this feed. Can I see it now or not? And different people see different things. Now, we've had that on the web for a long time. We will log into Twitter's homepage and we will see something different because it knows who we are. And OAuth is just extending that so that the web services can do it as well, so that we can draw our stuff out of Twitter and each of us will see what we see from that, rather than with the permissions built into the feed, rather than having a public feed and that's all there is. So it's there, it's built, it's working within the social network stuff.
Right, but what's the market force that's going to actually adopt that strategy? I don't see it. I think that, as you pointed out, Facebook's moving away from that kind of control toward something which gives the control to the user.
Well, I think we're going to end up having more than one control model, because there's a difference between what a quiz app needs to see about me and my friends and what we've done, and what a client like these guys build needs to see about it. There are going to be different modes that make sense, and we're sort of moving towards that now. We have that issue with the Twitter OAuth stuff. You log into Laura's site with Twitter OAuth, it knows who you are, and that's a great benefit. It saves you having to set up yet another account. But they ask for permission to post stuff back, and some people have said, why do you want to post stuff back? It's because there are places on the site that send tweets out, and that makes life easier. But it's hard. There isn't an easy way of expressing this thing can just see a little bit, this thing can see a lot, this thing can pretend to be me at the moment. And if you look at the way you have to log into Facebook from Seesmic, you have to go through like 5 dialog boxes to actually say, no, actually I really do want it to be my client at the moment, because their model for explaining that doesn't fit very well.
Loic?
No, I agree with Kevin in the fact that it's still too complicated, and if you think this is reading, but posting is the same. When you post, if you think about Facebook, you have a lot of control now on how you post. You can post private, you can post to your friends, you can post to a group, you can post in public, you can post to a page, which makes it even more complicated. You can post to several pages. And if you think about it from the user perspective, it's getting more and more complicated. And I think that's also
not
why.
Really. I mean, people will opt out of. That's why I don't use Google Reader anymore. It's not because it isn't useful. It's just not as useful as other things which are faster and have some sort of social filtering that offloads the decision making from me and puts it on the people that I think are smart and might have a better look at what's going on at any given time.
Yeah, I think that's what Robert is describing as in his curation, and I think we only scratch the surface here, because when you look at trending, for example, which we have not talked about, for me it's not very relevant most of the time, and now the Twitter trending is also getting super spammed. It's if you see the trending topics very often, it's just people very smart in either doing a game that they can if you to win you have to hashtag something with something, and so this is just the beginning. I'd like to see what's trending among my friends, for example, and so nobody is doing that. I'd like to I think that's
Some people are.
So yeah, that's come out. That's been built.
Right.
I can't
No,
think
but
right hand off the app.
at the platform
Could
level,
you say that
that's what I
again,
meant.
Laura? I couldn't hear you.
I have seen one or two apps that are starting, because that's something I've been fascinated about. I mean, think how valuable that is for a company to be able to track focus groups and then see what trends among those. Unfortunately, out of the 1,800 apps I've looked at in the last few weeks, I can't remember the names of which ones, but I will try and track them down.
Well, if you don't remember,
it's-
then
You can search on 140. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what I'm doing. I didn't want to plug my company. I thought that would be brazen.
Well, let me ask.
So TuneIn is one. That's if you've seen TuneIn, that's one that a bunch of my old colleagues at Technorati are building, which takes your Twitter feed and then averages it and gives you out, here are the links your friends are tweeting the most, and that's quite interesting.
well,
And
there
then
is TweetMeme too, right? Which does that. It tells you how your content is spreading and being retweeted.
No, this is the other way around. This is, what are your friends reading? And there's
Right.
Twitter
If you're
Times as
following
well.
100 people, what's trending amongst those 100 people, as opposed to trending among all Twitter, right?
Right.
Yeah, John, is that the other way around, or are these technologies moving in the same direction, even though they look different?
I'm trying to understand your question, Steve.
Well,
I was going to respond to what they were saying, which I can do, but I'm not sure if that's what
MG
you asked.
MG Siegler pointed out, I think, that some of the analytic features that are in TweetMeme that were just discussed or released a couple days ago are some of the things that we're starting to see from Bitly now.
Yeah.
Is that true? Are we going to be seeing some analytics from Bitly that go beyond, the original intent of the program?
I mean, yes. I mean, it's assuming that you know the original intent. I mean, this thing has been under construction for quite a while, and I think that now that as these services get to scale, the data becomes a lot more interesting. I mean, there's many ways to filter the data. I mean, there's a new version of TweetDeck that you'll see in the next 2 weeks. So there's a column which it sounds really simple, but I love, which gives you new followers. So for a particular account, you could look at a column of people who have just started to follow you. So as we've been going through this call, I've been watching people who've been adding me and following me, and it's that's a very simple filter, but there are a lot of Loic, you got to get to work on this. But it's an there's 101 ways of cutting this data. So specifically, Steve, you asked on the Bitly side. I mean, there were in September there were 1.5 billion Bitly links that were clicked on web-wide, that's about yesterday was about 65 million. Most of those are happening within the real-time stream. Many of them, and most of them within the sort of Twitter ecosystem, and then some outside of that. And watching the feed of that on an aggregate level, applying entity extraction to it, and so that we can pull out topics and entities, so you can see it on a vertical level, for a particular topic, and then slamming that against your social graph so that you can then filter it by your social graph is that data is starting to get really interesting.
So what I was asking before was what was being discussed as some sort of social graph filter to the trending topics around your friends. At what point do these two models intersect?
The two models, one model being the social graph and the other one being
being the sort of mass data. I forget the terminology you used. It was only a minute ago.
Yes, I think that they're starting to intersect now. I mean, you pointed explicitly to the TweetMeme service that Nick launched in the last week, which is a premium analytics service. And a lot of the data that he's showing in that premium analytics service is from the Bitly API. So he's hitting the API and getting click counts, and then wrapping that up into his analytics service. He's also adding into that a lot of the data that he's servicing from his retweet network, from the button which he's got around a whole bunch of publishers, a ton of publishers, that is feeding a set of signals in that relates to retweets. So he's mixing those two streams up because they're fairly open. I don't believe that Nick has access to the Firehose. And so he doesn't have the mechanism, and he may not even have the servers to be able to slam that up against the Firehose of data and actually resolve it against a full friend graph. So I think that it's happening sort of in bits and pieces. But I think that what's most interesting is these services that are large consumers of the API, of the Twitter API. Many of them are starting to actually spit stuff out the back end.
And that's it also sounds like they're starting to interoperate with each other. I mean, these companies are all companies that you're involved with. There's no special access that you're providing to each other, or is there? We've opted, and all of the BetaWorks companies have opted to have an open API, and we're driving connections between these companies. TweetMeme is not part of the BetaWorks network of companies, yet we do a whole bunch of things with them. I think that over the next 6 months, 12 months, you're going to start to see all this stuff get a lot more sophisticated, a lot more mashed up, and you're also going to get to see some rules of the road which will emerge in terms of the data usage. So you're reminding me that I've got to give Nick a shout, because the fact that Bitly's API, the terms of service of Bitly's API says that you can use it in 101 ways, but the moment you start making money from it, you should come chat with us. So if he starts to make money from that, we should have a conversation. So that you can pay yourself a better. I'm not sure I understand that.
Well, I mean, I think that the standard terms of uses of many of the APIs in this network have been that you can you have a very flexible set of terms if you are not, in turn, then selling the data. If you're reselling the data, then you should come talk to the company. Mm-hmm. So I think that's standard amongst many of these services, and that's something that Bitly has, and many of the BetaWorks companies have. So
what I'm really asking is, can if Loic wanted to basically walk up to one of your services in the same way that some of your services are walking up to each other, there would be no problem with that, right?
There's no problem at all. I mean, I think that, I mentioned before that Loic used, part of the Bitly API, which let him have authenticated access into Bitly, maybe 8 to 10 weeks before TweetDeck did. And so, the principles under which we're operating amongst the BetaWorks companies are that we're driving these services into market, and we're driving interoperability between the data streams, but we're doing it in an open fashion. Why are we doing it in an open fashion? Because it accelerates the growth of all of the above. And so as an open network, it is driving far more connectivity and far more sort of remashing and reintegration of the data than it would in a closed environment. So it's so Loic and I, we do not have there's no contract between us. Loic uses a lot of Twitter data, he uses a lot of Bitly data, he uses a lot of Twitter feed data. I mean, there's a lot of integration. In turn, Loic is integrated in some ways with TweetMeme and with all these other people, and it's so there's an integrated sort of embedded web of data sharing that is that I think characterizes part of the real-time stream.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that you're mentioning that you look like a little upset that someone is starting to monetize data coming from Bitly while you're actually also using it from Twitter, right? And I'm not taking sides here. As you said, we're very integrated with Bitly, and we've been, including before TweetDeck, absolutely. And we're happy about it, happy to help Bitly. But the question here is, those companies, I don't know about your portfolio, but we'll have to monetize one day, or we will all, disappear. So it's interesting that when you start monetizing, I would be, because you're also taking the data from Twitter that doesn't sell it to you, right? So
Yeah.
how do you see monetization?
So I think that's a great point. I mean, I think that I've said this before, but one of the things that we need the sort of the rules of the road and understanding exactly how all these individual pieces will monetize, most importantly, the platforms at the center, is vitally important to the evolution of the streams. I think that, I did say I was upset at Nick. I said that I should have a conversation with him about it. I agree with you. I mean, I said to our friends at Twitter is that if a tweet is composed on TweetDeck, if it then goes through obviously the Twitter network, if it's then consumed on Seismic, and then maybe it's republished into Facebook, the rights and ownership that relate to the activity in the link that was in that tweet is a very complex question. I mean, I think that
Right.
Bitly has what I would refer to as proxy rights to that data. I think that Twitter has rights to that data. I think that the clients likely who interacted with it have proxy rights to the data. And then last but not least, or most importantly, I think the user has rights to that data. And so I think it's very complicated. And I think that the rules of the road of how monetization happens, it's still very early days.
But it is a huge point because the data is among the most valuable thing that is flowing around. And when people come up to me again and again and again and say, "Oh, but Twitter has no business model," I just shake my head in disbelief because certainly Google has proven the model of a rich stream of data is worth quite a lot. So it's going to be interesting to see how that happens and how that plays out.
So Laura, that you just handed me an opening here.
Uh-oh.
Nice.
Never good.
I'm sure you won't answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because this is TV, so we get to see your expression.
Is this TV? I have no poker face whatsoever, so I'm just gonna.
All right. So if you think that the Twitter has a business model, what would the business model be for acquiring 140?
Well, I mean, I have not been secretive at all about the fact that one of the ways I thought of 140 was trying to think, well, how could Twitter make money? Who is making money on Twitter? I knew as a consultant I was getting all my clients from Twitter. I knew plenty of business people were building their networks and transacting and actually doing business with one another because of Twitter. So my thought was you build a marketplace and you enable those transactions, you make them easier, you serve that community, and I mean genuinely serve, not lip service, serve. And if you make those transactions more frictionless and more valuable to everyone involved, you deserve to have a share of that.
So how soon do you think that we'll be able to understand what, if anything, is going to be happening between you and Twitter?
I don't think people should be that concerned about what, if anything, is happening between us and Twitter. I think we have an interesting model. I think we have a ton to learn. We're putting it out there very publicly, very fast, so we can learn what the community needs. And whether we become part of another company, and Twitter's not the only company by far that we could easily become a part of, we have a pretty important company to build ourselves, so we're not getting distracted by all that hype.
Right. Well, I don't think. I think a lot of the interest about this comes from the fact that as a very public-facing product that you're delivering, that's good news for people who consider the importance of Twitter learning how to grow into the ecosystem that has been created around it. and be more open in terms of its strategies and you know, on ramps and off ramps to the Twitter stream. So I think that people are excited about this possibility because you've been so you know, open in terms of the way that you've approached the idea of, you know, a Twitter app store. I mean, basically, do you think there's going to be a Facebook app store in the near future? Do you think that your model is going to be cloned just like so many of these other systems have emerged?
Well, there was something on CNN.com today about the proliferation of app stores. I mean, didn't Facebook try and build its own app store with just having that centralized application and platform? I mean, I'd say what's holding Facebook back from a genuine app store is that most of the apps in Facebook are pretty formulaic and similar, and maybe the platform isn't open enough to allow the kind of innovation that we see in the Twitter ecosystem.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up. Kevin, any last thoughts?
So.
And
Well,
thank you, by the way, Steve.
Oh,
So-
please stick around just so that I can actually formally say goodbye and thank you for being here. But
So
Kevin,
I'm
go
going to back up what Laura was saying a bit. Now, obviously, I'm a big fan of 140 and have been advising her on it. So I have an interest in this, but I want it to succeed because I think what she's doing is very important. She's going out and gathering this sort of vast ecosystem of applications and giving them a place to be talked about and spoken about. And, you know, I joked that what 140 could do is just put a little shopping list tag on each application saying, here's what it would cost Twitter to buy this app and incorporate it. You know, there's lots of little possibilities you can do with this once you start being able to find these things, because you know, and it's different from the sort of the iTunes App Store model of, no, you have to sort of work hard and please us to be in it. It's much more of a gathering together of all the exciting stuff that's going on and making a place for people to discuss that and find it. And I think that's really interesting.
And I know John, Loic, and Kevin, you all know how adamant I've been that, you know, this has to be open. This has to be as impartial as it possibly can be.
Right. So how do
Twitter
you
is such
how
an
do you
open
actually run
ecosystem as
how
soon
do
as
you
you
run
start to
the
throttle
apps
it.
based on popularity? I'm very curious about that. I believe CSpeak is
Oh man,
downloads one of the most popular.
I can
And
comment.
surprisingly,
that
it's not out there.
Strictly
Oh.
mathematical. We do have kind of a concept of PageRank. It's strictly mathematical. It is embryonic. It has lots more
So you're
factors
saying
that are
so
going
you're
to get
saying
worked into
CSpeak
the
is
algorithm.
not in the top 15 mathematically most popular apps.
I got an email from Loic saying, "But I am the number 2 app. How come I'm not in the number 1 slot?" Loic, just said. But no, it has to be open. Twitter has a tremendous open ethos. Twitter's openness is why there's so much diversity in the applications and services being built. I think it's fascinating how many just core pieces of software and websites and things that erstwhile had nothing to do with Twitter are now suddenly building Twitter integrations. I thought I had bit off a defined subset, but that defined subset is exploding, you know, with AIM coming out and everybody coming out and saying, oh, and we also work off the Twitter API. Taxonomy nightmare. Thanks a lot, guys. But
Laura,
I think it's really exciting.
Laura, seriously, it's very exciting, but how do you do your math?
It is a mixture of off-site and on-site measures that would suggest quality and or popularity. So since it's heavily based on on-site, yes, it is somewhat gameable. If you get, obviously it would be in our interest if you get tons of people coming to the site and voting, sort of the model that the awards, your friend did with the awards show. I can't remember the name of. I apologize. I slept at the office last night.
Edo.
No, the other one. They had the ceremony and everything. What was the name of that award ceremony?
Well, the Shorty Awards?
The Shorty Awards, right? That was
Greg
purely
Gallant, yeah.
voting, and it was by intent, completely gameable. So our metric is by intent, yeah, partly gameable. I mean, if you have a ton of traffic on your page, if you have a ton of positive reviews, that kind of thing is going to affect it. But we're also working hard to identify third-party measures that suggest other people think the app is good and aren't campaign-based. And of course, I won't comment specifically on what those are because then they'll become campaign-based.
So Loic, though, I'll help
it's
you.
embryonic now, Loic, but it should continue to improve. And we will also divide up the content in many more different ways. We never imagined we'd have this big a user base this fast. So luckily we have a fantastic engineering team rolling out features pretty fast.
You were going to help him, John?
Yeah, I was just gonna help you. Look, I just looked at the most popular. We've got 1, 3, and 10 at BetaWorks right now. So if he were a BetaWorks company, he'd be up there.
Sure.
Well, is
That's
that an
a great.
offer?
Is that a some kind of offer, John? So no, yeah. I mean, Laura, I think you know how much of a supporter I've been. But when I look at the 20 most popular apps that you're publicizing, and we're not in there, you can debate about what rank exactly, but.
Twirl has frequently been in there,
Yeah,
hasn't it?
Sysmic is bigger than Twirl, and it's not in there. So, anyway.
I've seen studies looking at source tags that showed Twirl much bigger market share than Seismic. I mean, nobody knows how to measure this stuff yet. It's an emerging science,
Right.
and we're
Well,
looking for
if
as
you
much
get
data
a-
as we can find.
Laura, we have with Sysmic Web a direct access to data coming from Twitter, so we have a pretty good idea of the market shares as well.
Well, let me say that if you do get acquired,
I was gonna
this
ask
is
you-
going to get even more intense, Laura.
It totally will. I mean, I've put myself into an impossible diplomatic situation considering how many friends I have in the ecosystem. I had to completely recuse myself about all decisions about whether or not CoTweet would be a featured app and everything because I'm an advisor. I disclose the heck out of everything and try and stay as reasonable as I can, and that's the best I can hope for. By the way, I did finally find the name of the app that will show you trends among your friends. Not to change the topic, but I didn't want to forget this. It's Graph Edge. It's one of the Boston lineup that was profiled in the Boston Globe this past Sunday. Unfortunately, it's in closed beta, so you can't see it.
The Boston
they're
Globe's
all-
still publishing.
Well, I think it's also for sale. Maybe we should put a little tag how much it's worth on 140 as well, right? There are also a couple of really specific ones. I8 will show you what the trends in restaurants among your Twitter friends are. There's also a trends map that will show you specific trends among your group. So I'm psyched to see more innovation. And one of the hopes with creating 140 was to make more innovation possible because we could finally see if there was already an app for that and then build out on new ideas, new features, new innovations, compare notes, see what works, see what doesn't.
Laura, just one point here is that listening to Loic, I mean, I think that it's I think you should put clearly on 140 the fact that this is generated algorithmically and it's not editorial, because I think that one of the things that will help the acceleration and the adoption of a lot of services is that if there's just clear, transparent if we understand, we as users understand
Right.
when something is an editorial pick versus when something is actually being surfaced by using data from the stream. And I think that was a huge issue with the SUL and other things which have been out there, which have been editorially driven. And I think that it's if this is algorithmic, then that's good. It's good for the market because it's actually an indicator of the market.
Yes, and we do actually have some of this covered in our FAQs, which I'm sure you are all familiar, probably more familiar than I am, with the need to constantly rewrite your FAQs. And honestly, this is one of the reasons we haven't rolled out a lot of the commercial stuff that's in the pipeline, because certainly paid placements is something we've gotten tons of demand for. Until our users understand our rubric and are literate in terms of what is editorial, what is mathematical, what is paid, we don't want those lines blurring, because if we're coming out there in an advertorial stance and like pushing and being super biased, we're not serving the community. We fail.
Right.
All right. Well, this has taken a little time to gain some momentum, but now I can't shut you guys up. So I'm just going to say I want to thank. First of all, I want to thank our sponsors. This TriCast was developed and produced with the aid of NewTek and their fabulous TriCaster, and it's sponsored by Rackspace. And I encourage you to take a look at what's going on at Building 43 as we start to build out what's called the real-time network, and that's at building43.com/realtime. There will be a transcript of this show as soon as Simulscribe makes it available to us, which will be posted along with the YouTube version of this show on gilmoregang.techcrunch.com. And I want to thank John Borthwick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for showing up. I want to thank Pistachio, a.k.a.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Laura Fitton. You can now consider yourself to be one of the gang.
Oh, you're very sweet.
Okay. And Loic has been a member of the gang, although owing to immigration policies, he hasn't been allowed on the show from time to time.
I'm working on my Steve Gilmore green card.
Yes. Let me know how that
Thanks,
goes.
Steve.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for.
But what
Thank
you
you all.
don't know is
Great
you
to
won't
see
be
you guys.
admitted in French customs either. That's my surprise when you go to the web in December.
I'm hoping that's the case. And Dan Farber, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, I assume
for
that means
long.
that you've been listening and enjoying. Thanks so much. The next time that you're on the show, I'd like to see the CBS newsroom in the background. So let's try and make that on video. Okay.
All right.
Okay, thank you. And Scoble, we all know how much we love Scoble. And please don't tune into the show that he went and left us for. Kevin Marks, thank you as always.
Thank you. No, it's nice to be on. Great conversation today.
This is Steve Gilmore. This has been the Gilmore Gang. What? Oh, John, I thanked John, didn't I?
You did thank John.
You did.
Yeah. But I'll thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay. Picture of me. Yeah, thank you. Okay, this is Steve Gilmore. This has been the Gilmore Gang. I want to thank everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. There will be another show in the pipeline. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.